Welcome to Sleepy Explainer, a place where curiosity drifts slowly into dreams, and where the wonders of our planet become gentle stories to carry you into rest. Tonight, I invite you to lie back, breathe slowly, and listen not with the urgency of study, but with the calm acceptance of someone who is about to drift into sleep. The world has many landscapes, many mysteries, and many processes that operate far beyond the pace of human lives. And tonight we will be thinking about deserts, those wide, silent expanses of sand and stone that stretch across continents, shaping cultures, ecosystems, and even the way the earth breathes. As you close your eyes, I wonder where you are listening from. Are you somewhere green, where trees gather moisture from the air? Or perhaps you are in a city where the lights never quite go out, but the thought of wide-open desert skies still beckons. If you are among the growing community of listeners, thank you for being here. Every time you press play, every time you choose this quiet corner of the internet, you are helping this channel continue, and I am grateful. Please don't feel the need to stay awake through every detail. This story will be here for you again tomorrow. Deserts are often imagined as emptiness, a place of absence where nothing thrives, but the truth is far more complex and far more beautiful. To ask why deserts exist is to begin a conversation with the earth itself, to follow invisible threads of air, water, and stone that weave together across deep time. The earth is restless, alive with hidden processes, and deserts are one of its most eloquent expressions. The winds that sweep across continents, the patterns of rainfall that come and go with the tilt of the planet, the rise of mountains that block moist clouds, and the pull of cold ocean currents that cool the air and rob it of rain, all these forces conspire to create these vast drylands. They are not accidental voids, but the outcome of a careful balance between energy from the sun, movement of air, and the shifting surface of the earth. Imagine for a moment that you are standing on a high plateau at dusk, the air still warm from the day's heat. As the sun slips away, the sky deepens into a purple haze, and the ground begins to release its stored warmth. You can almost hear the silence, as though the desert itself were breathing in and out, waiting. Beneath your feet, the soil tells a story older than civilizations, a story written in grains of quartz, feldspar, and salt carried by winds for centuries. Above you, the stars appear sharper, brighter, and closer than anywhere else, as if the thin, dry air has peeled away the veil that usually softens the night sky. This is not absence. It is presence, distilled to its most elemental form. But deserts are not just about what you see. They are about what you cannot see. Deep beneath the ground, ancient aquifers hold pockets of water that may be thousands of years old. Remnants from wetter climates long vanished. Tiny microorganisms cling to life in the soil, waiting for the brief gift of rain to bloom into sudden color. Even the sand itself is a process in motion, sculpted by the constant dialogue between wind and gravity. The shifting dunes whisper of time far beyond our own, moving slowly, reshaping the land, reminding us that permanence is an illusion. Deserts exist because the earth is never still. When we speak of deserts, we often imagine the Sahara, with its endless dunes that stretch beyond the horizon. Yet deserts take many forms. Some are hot, like the Sahara or the Arabian Desert, where summer temperatures soar high enough to make the air shimmer. Others are cold, like the Gobi in Mongolia, or the Patagonian Desert in South America, where frost may bite at night and snow can drift across barren ground. The defining feature is not heat, but dryness. Less than 250 millimeters of rain a year, often arriving in sudden bursts that vanish as quickly as they appear. These hidden rules of climate, invisible to the eye, are the true architects of deserts. To understand why they exist, we must begin with the circulation of the atmosphere, a grand, slow ballet that moves heat and moisture around the globe. Near the equator, the sun's energy is strong, heating the land and causing moist air to rise. As it rises, it cools, releasing rain that feeds the world's great tropical forests. The now dry air drifts away from the equator, sinking again at about 30 degrees latitude north and south, pressing down upon the land and warming as it descends. Warm, dry air discourages rain, and under these belts, deserts are born. This is why the Sahara in Africa, the Arabian Desert in the Middle East, and the deserts of Australia all sit at roughly the same distance from the equator, like silent sentinels aligned along the planet's geometry. But that is only part of the story. Mountains play their role, lifting moist air on one side, wringing it dry in clouds and rainfall, and leaving the other side starved of moisture. This is why the Atacama Desert in Chile, one of the driest places on Earth, lies in the shadow of the Andes. Cold ocean currents, too, hold secrets, chilling the air along coastlines so that it cannot hold moisture, creating foggy yet rainless deserts like the Namib in Namibia. The processes that make deserts are many, layered like the geology of the Earth itself. As you listen, let your mind drift over this invisible architecture. Imagine currents of air flowing like rivers across the sky, rising, falling, circling endlessly. Imagine tectonic plates pushing mountains higher, redirecting winds, changing where the clouds will break. Imagine cold water welling up from the deep ocean, whispering its chill into the air above, deciding whether rain will fall. These are the hidden processes that shape deserts, the quiet work of the planet as it breathes across centuries. And as you lie here, perhaps you can picture the Earth as a living system, endlessly adjusting itself, endlessly reshaping the boundaries between fertile fields and arid sands. Deserts may seem timeless, but they too are in motion, expanding, shrinking, shifting with the climate. They exist because Earth is restless, and they remind us that nothing is ever still, not even silence. The story of deserts is as much about history as it is about science, for the sands remember, and the rocks hold the memory of climates long past. To wander through a desert is to walk through a timeline of Earth itself, where each layer of stone is like a page in a book written by wind and water. Long before humans walked these landscapes, before even the forests and flowering plants we know today, there were deserts under ancient skies. Geologists studying rocks from hundreds of millions of years ago can find ripples and cross-bedded layers of sandstone that tell of dunes hardened into stone, the remnants of long-vanished seas and shifting winds. These fossil deserts whisper that aridity is not new, but a recurring rhythm in Earth's climate, an echo that has sounded again and again across the ages. When we study the Sahara, we see not just a present landscape of sand and stone, but a canvas that has changed many times. 10,000 years ago, the Sahara was a different world. Lakes spread across the land, grasslands stretched where dunes now rise, and giraffes, crocodiles, and hippos roamed freely. This was the time of the Green Sahara, brought about by subtle changes in Earth's orbit that shifted the monsoons northward, bringing rains to a place that now seems locked in silence. Cave paintings found in the Tassili Ajir Mountains show scenes of human life in that green world: herds of cattle, people dancing, boats gliding across lakes that no longer exist. These artworks are not just records of culture, but evidence that deserts are never fixed, that the lines between arid and fertile are constantly redrawn by the rhythms of Earth. Scientists explain this shifting Sahara through what is known as the precession of the equinoxes, a slow wobble in Earth's rotation that changes the timing of the seasons over tens of thousands of years. This wobble, combined with changes in the tilt and shape of Earth's orbit, alters where sunlight falls most strongly and how monsoons deliver their rains. In some eras, Africa is wetter, rivers flow, and vegetation spreads. In others, dryness tightens its grip, and the desert expands. What we see today is only one chapter in a very long book. To imagine the Sahara only as eternal sand is to miss the truth that it has been green, blue, and teeming with life in the not-so-distant past. And this is not unique to Africa. Across the globe, deserts have expanded and contracted with the pulse of ice ages and interglacial warmth. During colder times, deserts grew larger, the winds stronger, carrying dust across continents. Sediments taken from the bottom of the oceans reveal layers of this dust, tiny grains carried by storms from Africa, Asia, and the Americas, falling into the sea like a fine, persistent rain of memory. These layers act like pages in a diary, each one telling of times when winds were fierce, when lands dried, when Earth shifted from one rhythm to another. By studying these grains, scientists can read the story of ancient climates, tracing back hundreds of thousands of years, and perhaps even glimpsing what lies ahead. Even the cold deserts of the world have their tales to tell. The Gobi, stretching across northern China and Mongolia, was shaped not only by dry winds but by the rising Himalayas, which altered global circulation patterns and cast long shadows of dryness across Central Asia. The deserts of North America, such as the Mojave and the Sonoran, formed in the rain shadows of the Sierra Nevada and Rocky Mountains, deserts whose histories are linked with tectonic uplift and the slow drift of plates. Everywhere we look, deserts are less a singular phenomenon than a recurring answer to the same question. What happens when wind, water, and stone meet under the specific conditions of geography and climate? The answer is always aridity, but each desert expresses it differently, shaped by the details of its own history. But deserts are not merely geological or climatological phenomena. They have always been part of the human story. Our ancestors crossed them, feared them, revered them, and sometimes thrived in them. The early Egyptians looked to the desert as both a threat and a shield, a barren expanse that protected the fertile Nile from invasion. Traders in Mesopotamia learned to navigate their dry frontiers, building routes that would later become the Silk Road. The desert was both barrier and bridge, isolating civilizations while also connecting them through trade and culture. And still, it shaped their myths and beliefs, giving rise to stories of gods and spirits that dwelled in the endless sands. The idea of a desert has always carried more than physical meaning. It carries metaphor. To poets and prophets, deserts symbolize emptiness, exile, reflection, and revelation. It is in deserts that prophets wandered, in deserts that ascetics sought clarity, in deserts that silence became a teacher. For as much as the scientific history of deserts can be read in rocks and winds, the human history of deserts is written in stories and faiths. Both layers are important. One tells us how deserts came to be, the other tells us how deserts have lived inside us, shaping the way we imagine struggle and renewal. And still, if you listen closely, deserts continue to remind us of time itself. When you walk across dunes that move by mere inches in a year, when you see stones polished by centuries of wind, when you stand at the edge of a canyon carved by a river that dried thousands of years ago, you are not just standing in a place, but in a moment stretched out across millennia. The human timescale and the desert timescale rarely meet, and when they do, we are reminded how brief we are, and how patient the earth is. So as you lie there, letting your mind drift with the rhythm of this story, picture the Sahara green with rivers, or the Gobi under the shadow of glaciers, or the Mojave at a time when mammoths walked its valleys. Deserts exist not only because of processes we can measure, but because Earth itself has always shifted, always changed, and always will. They are chapters in a planetary story that is never finished, and we are fortunate enough to read just one page of it. When we think of deserts as they are today, we are seeing the outcome of natural processes that never rest, cycles of formation and transformation that can take thousands or even millions of years. The desert is not a static picture. It is the ongoing result of winds sculpting dunes, of rivers carving valleys and then vanishing, of heat pulling water into the sky where it drifts away to fall elsewhere. Every desert we know was once shaped by forces invisible to the casual eye. And in understanding these processes, we begin to glimpse not only how deserts are born, but how they may continue to change in the future. The key to this mystery lies in the grand circulation of Earth's atmosphere. For the air above us is as much a sculptor of landscapes as the rivers that cut into stone. At the equator, as we have seen, warm, moist air rises and delivers rain to jungles and forests. But when that air descends farther north or south, it falls dry, pressing down upon the land and creating conditions where rain cannot gather. These descending cells of air are known as the Hadley circulation, and they are one of the planet's great engines of climate. In these belts of descending air lie many of the world's great deserts, created not by accident but by design of physics, as though the Earth itself had a rhythm that paints bands of green and brown across its surface. But air alone cannot explain the variety of desert forms, and to understand the subtlety, we must look also to the surface of the Earth itself. Where mountains rise, moist winds are forced upward, cooling as they climb, shedding their rain upon one side of the range and leaving the far side in shadow, a phenomenon known as the rain shadow effect. Over centuries, the land in that shadow withers, Rain becomes scarce, vegetation thins, and eventually a desert forms. This is why the Great Basin Desert of North America lies behind the Sierra Nevada and Rocky Mountains, and why Chile's Atacama, dry beyond comprehension, sits in the shadow of the towering Andes. Oceans, too, lend their hand in shaping dryness. Cold currents, such as the Humboldt off South America or the Benguela off Africa, chill the air above them, robbing it of moisture and preventing rain from forming even as fog creeps inland. The Namib Desert, one of the oldest in the world, exists because of this delicate balance between sea and air, between warmth and chill, a balance that has persisted for millions of years. Deserts also owe their form to the patient work of wind, which does more than simply withhold rain. The wind sculpts, it erodes, it carries, and it deposits. Sand dunes, those great waves of stone and time, are nothing but grains moved by persistent breezes, gathered into forms that march slowly across the land. Some dunes can stretch for hundreds of kilometers, their crests moving at the pace of a human walk over decades. Others are small and fleeting, shifting with each season, whispering of impermanence. The variety of dunes themselves is astonishing. Crescent-shaped barchans that migrate across open plains, star dunes with multiple arms pointing in every direction like frozen explosions, linear dunes that run for kilometers in straight lines, as though the desert itself were combed by a giant hand. To sleep beneath the stars in such a place is to hear the wind sing a lullaby to the sand, a song it has been singing since before our ancestors knew fire. Yet water, though scarce, still plays its role. Flash floods carve gullies in desert rock, creating wadis and canyons where one might imagine no river ever flowed. When the rain comes, it often arrives in sudden torrents, overwhelming the dry ground, racing across the land before disappearing once again into the silence. These brief bursts of life reshape the land, moving stones, building alluvial fans where sediments spread at the base of mountains. Over time, the desert's face is remade again and again by the interplay of too little water and then too much. A cycle of deprivation and abundance that mirrors life itself. And beneath the surface, unseen by casual eyes, the ground tells another story. Salt flats, or playas, are remnants of ancient lakes that once filled desert basins, evaporated over millennia, until only salt remained. The Salar de Uyuni in Bolivia, the world's largest salt flat, is one such reminder, a vast mirror where sky and earth become indistinguishable. In other deserts, rocks fractured by heat and cold split into shards, creating pavements of stones polished by wind and time. These desert pavements look barren, but are fragile mosaics of geology, shaped over thousands of years. Even the soil itself is alive, covered with cryptobiotic crusts of lichens, algae, and bacteria that hold the sand together and provide the foundation for rare bursts of vegetation. Deserts may look empty, but every detail is the result of long processes working invisibly, patiently, like a careful painter returning again and again to a canvas over centuries. Consider, too, how deserts evolve with climate. They expand and contract with the rise and fall of global temperatures, responding to ice ages and warm periods with a slow but steady migration of their boundaries. During glacial times, when much of the world's water was locked in ice, deserts grew larger and winds stronger, carrying dust across oceans. In warmer periods, when the ice melted and rains returned, deserts shrank, revealing fertile soils beneath that would nurture grasses, forests, and even early human settlements. This dance continues still, even if the pace feels imperceptible to us. Every dune, every dry basin, every cracked plain is a chapter in the story of Earth's restless climate. A story written not in years or centuries, but in epochs. And perhaps most haunting of all is the realization that deserts are still being formed today, still growing in places where rain retreats, where forests are cut down, where the land is left bare and vulnerable to wind. Natural processes continue to sculpt deserts across Africa, Asia, and the Americas. But human hands, too, are now part of the equation. Overgrazing, deforestation, and poor water management can hasten the spread of aridity, creating new drylands where once there was fertility. In this way, the line between natural and human process blurs, and deserts become not just a reflection of planetary forces, but also a mirror of our own choices. Yet for now, let us linger on the natural side of the story, for it is vast and calming, a reminder that the earth is alive with processes far older and far greater than us, processes that shape deserts as they have always done. So, as you rest, imagine the breath of wind carrying grains of sand. Imagine the slow tilt of the planet, redirecting rains. Imagine rivers that appear and vanish in a heartbeat, and mountains that rise high enough to steal moisture from the clouds. These are the artisans of the desert, quiet workers of time, and they continue their work while we sleep. To understand deserts more fully, we must travel across the world in our imaginations, moving gently from continent to continent, tracing the unique expressions of dryness that each desert presents. Each one is a variation on the same theme, a different note in the great symphony of aridity. And by visiting them in thought, we begin to appreciate not only their differences, but the unity of the forces that create them. Let us begin with the Sahara, the largest hot desert on Earth, stretching across North Africa like a golden sea. Covering an area nearly the size of the United States, the Sahara is more than just dunes, though its rolling seas of sand are iconic. Much of it is made of gravel plains, rocky plateaus, and mountains rising like islands from a pale ocean. In its heart lies the Ahagar Mountains of Algeria, dark and rugged, where volcanic peaks rise above the endless sand. In the Sahara's vastness, temperatures can soar above 50 degrees Celsius by day, only to plummet at night under skies filled with stars so sharp they seem etched into the darkness. Yet even here life persists. The fennec fox, with its oversized ears, listens for insects in the sand. The addax antelope, pale as bleached stone, wanders across barren flats in search of sparse grasses. Nomadic peoples like the Tuareg move across the land with knowledge passed down through generations, reading the desert like a book written in subtle signs. Moving eastward, we arrive at the Arabian Desert, draped across the Arabian Peninsula, home to the Rub al-Khali, or Empty Quarter, the largest continuous sand desert in the world. Here dunes rise like mountains, some over 250 meters high, their crests sculpted by winds into patterns that shift year by year. The vastness of the Empty Quarter has long inspired awe, and it is said that no place on earth is more silent, more remote. The Bedouin people who traveled here carried stories of hidden cities buried beneath the sands, myths of civilizations swallowed whole by the desert's hunger. To walk through this land, if one could endure the heat, would be to step into a silence so profound that one might hear the very beat of one's own heart echoing in the stillness. Across the sea to the east lies the Thar Desert of India and Pakistan, often called the Great Indian Desert. Unlike the Sahara's barrenness, the Thar is densely populated, home to villages, farms, and ancient trade routes. Monsoon rains brush its edges, and people have learned to cultivate millet, barley, and pulses in its sandy soils. Camels, the ships of the desert, remain central to life here, carrying goods and people across distances that still resist easy passage. The Thar reminds us that deserts are not always empty. They are landscapes of adaptation, where human ingenuity meets the challenge of aridity with resilience and tradition. Farther east still, in China and Mongolia, spreads the Gobi Desert, a place of gravel plains, rocky outcrops, and fierce winters. Unlike the scorching heat of the Sahara, the Gobi's aridity is matched by cold winds that sweep down from Siberia, chilling the land until snow lies briefly on the ground. Here, wild Bactrian camels roam, survivors of an environment that few creatures can withstand, and herders guide their flocks through valleys where water is rare and grass even rarer. The Gobi was once a corridor for the Silk Road, a place where traders carried silk, spices, and stories between east and west, braving hardships to connect distant civilizations. To imagine the Gobi is to imagine both the severity of cold deserts and the richness of history they conceal. Let us drift south to Australia, a continent where deserts cover much of the interior. The Great Victoria, the Simpson, the Great Sandy, these names alone speak of expanses that stretch beneath skies of piercing blue. Red sand and spinifex grass dominate, while kangaroos, dingoes, and wedge-tailed eagles inhabit the land. Aboriginal peoples have lived here for tens of thousands of years, their dreamtime stories mapping waterholes and sacred sites, guiding them through landscapes that might otherwise seem hostile. The desert here is not absence, but a spiritual presence, alive with meaning and memory, woven into the oldest continuous culture on Earth. Cross the Pacific in thought, and you arrive at the deserts of the Americas. The Atacama of Chile and Peru is among the driest places on Earth, where in some regions no measurable rain has fallen for centuries. Yet even here life clings on. Hardy shrubs, lichens fed by fog, and flamingos feeding in rare salt lakes. Astronomers build observatories on its heights, where the air is so clear that stars blaze without distortion, and the Milky Way arches across the night like a river of light. To stand in the Atacama is to stand in a silence so ancient it feels almost Martian, and indeed, scientists test rovers here to prepare for missions to Mars. The Atacama is Earth's closest echo of another planet. Northward lies the Sonoran Desert, straddling the United States and Mexico, where saguaro cacti raise their arms like guardians of the land. In spring, wildflowers bloom after rains, painting the desert with colors so vivid they seem unreal. Roadrunners dart between shrubs, Gila monsters bask in the heat, and desert tortoises burrow to escape the sun. This desert pulses with surprising abundance, reminding us that aridity does not mean lifelessness. In the Mojave, nearby, Joshua trees stand twisted and strange, their silhouettes etched against sunsets that bathe the land in gold. The deserts of North America are places of resilience, each plant and animal a master of adaptation, each detail a lesson in endurance. And in Africa once more, we find the Namib, stretching along the Atlantic coast of Namibia, its dunes among the tallest in the world, some glowing red in the rising sun. This desert is ancient, perhaps the oldest in existence, shaped by winds and currents for millions of years. Along its coast lies the Skeleton Coast, named for the shipwrecks scattered across its sands, where fog rolls inland from the cold sea, feeding mosses and lichens that cling to life. Even in such severity, life finds a foothold, from the beetles that collect dew on their backs to the oryx that wander the dry plains. The Namib is a paradox, harsh, yet delicate, forbidding, yet fragile. As you drift through these places in thought, imagine them connected by invisible threads, the Sahara to the Arabian, the Gobi to the Atacama, the Namib to the Mojave. Each is shaped by its geography, its climate, its history, but each also tells the same story that deserts are not mistakes, not empty wastelands, but necessary expressions of the Earth's patterns. They are reminders of balance, of how air and water and stone collaborate to create diversity on the planet. Without deserts, the Earth would be less varied, less mysterious, less whole. And so, as you rest, picture the globe turning slowly, deserts scattered across it like jewels of silence. From the red sands of Australia to the icy stones of Mongolia, from the vast Sahara to the delicate Namib, deserts stretch as far as imagination, each one different, each one the same. They are chapters in the book of Earth, written not with ink but with time, waiting for us to read them. Deserts are not only landscapes of stone, sand, and wind, they are also landscapes of the human spirit, shaping myths, traditions, and beliefs across cultures that have lived in or near them for millennia. To dwell in a desert is to learn patience, to live in tune with scarcity, to understand the rhythms of silence and the importance of water. It is no surprise that many of the world's great religions and philosophies were touched by desert experience, for the vast emptiness of these places seems to invite reflection, solitude, and visions. In the deserts of the Middle East, prophets wandered, finding clarity in the silence, hearing voices of gods carried in the wind. The story of Moses receiving the Ten Commandments is bound to the wilderness, and the Quran itself was revealed in the arid lands of Arabia. The desert becomes here not just a backdrop but a crucible, a place where revelation is possible because the noise of the world falls away, leaving only the self and the infinite horizon. Among the Bedouin, the nomadic tribes of the Arabian Peninsula, the desert was never only hardship but also teacher. Their poetry sings of the stars guiding them, of oases as gifts of providence, of camels as companions in survival. Their oral traditions carry not only practical knowledge, where to find water, how to read the wind, how to endure the heat, but also metaphors of love, loss, and endurance that take their imagery from the land. To describe longing, they might speak of a lone tent in a vast plain. To describe resilience, they might invoke the camel, moving slowly but steadily across endless dunes. The desert becomes the language of their soul, its symbols woven into their identity. Far away, in the deserts of North America, the Navajo, Hopi, and other indigenous peoples found in arid lands a canvas of sacred meaning. For the Navajo, the desert mesas and canyons are part of their origin stories, places where the holy people emerged, and where rituals of balance and harmony are still tied. The Hopi mesas in Arizona are not barren but alive with spiritual presence, each formation carrying a story of creation, each horizon line connecting earth and sky. To these peoples, the desert is not absence but relationship, a living relative that demands respect, offering sustenance in exchange for reverence. Their ceremonies, songs, and dances are woven into the cycles of planting, rain, and harvest, showing that even in the driest of places, life can be abundant if it is lived in balance with the land. In Africa, desert cultures have their own traditions bound to the sands. The Tuareg, often called the Blue People, for the indigo cloth they wear, carry an identity as children of the Sahara. Their songs and poems speak of journeys across the dunes, of the companionship of camels, of the beauty of stars overhead. They tell stories of ancient cities like Timbuktu, once thriving centers of learning and trade at the edge of the desert, proof that even the harshest landscapes can nurture knowledge and culture. In their mythology, the desert is not a void but a home, demanding and generous in equal measure, shaping people who learn to live lightly, carrying only what is essential. Even in lands not primarily desert, the symbolism of these dry landscapes runs deep. In literature, deserts often represent exile or testing, the place where a hero must wander before returning transform. In poetry, deserts symbolize longing, vastness, silence. In dreams and metaphors, they stand for emptiness or renewal, for the stripping away of excess until only truth remains. There is a reason why spiritual seekers across cultures have sought deserts as places of retreat. In silence, the mind begins to speak differently. In emptiness, meaning begins to grow. The desert teaches that nothingness is not empty at all, but full of potential. And yet deserts are not only spiritual, they are cultural. The Silk Road, that vast network of trade routes connecting east and west, would not have existed without desert crossings. Caravans laden with silk, spices, and stories made their way across the Gobi and Taklamakan, guided by stars and survival. Oases like Kashgar or Dunhuang became jewels of culture, crossroads where languages, religions, and ideas mingled. In these places, art and knowledge flourished, nourished not by abundance of water but by abundance of encounter. Deserts, paradoxically, became places of connection, binding distant worlds together through the courage of those who dared to cross them. The myths of lost cities hidden beneath the sands also echo across cultures. From Ubar, the legendary Atlantis of the sands in Arabia, to Zerzura, the city of white whispered about in the Sahara, to Cibola in the deserts of the American Southwest, humans have always dreamed of treasures buried in the emptiness. These myths speak not only of gold and wealth but of the human tendency to see deserts as places where the ordinary rules of the world are suspended, where mystery and possibility linger. For though deserts may strip life down to its essentials, they also leave room for imagination to fill the silence. Even the creatures of the desert have entered mythology. The camel, patient and enduring, is seen as a symbol of survival and adaptation. The scorpion, dangerous yet resilient, often appears in legends as a warning or a guardian. In Egyptian tradition, the god Set was associated with the desert, embodying its chaos and harshness, while other deities like Ra crossed the desert sky in the sun's chariot each day. In stories from the Arabian Peninsula, jinn are said to inhabit the emptiness, spirits of fire roaming where humans rarely go. These myths remind us that deserts are not only physical landscapes but imaginative ones, shaping the stories we tell about resilience, danger, and mystery. So as you listen, drifting closer to sleep, imagine the desert not only as a place of sand and silence, but as a stage where human beings have wrestled with meaning. Imagine prophets under starlight, hearing voices in the wind, Imagine traders guiding their caravans by the constellations, their footsteps writing paths across dunes. Imagine poets whispering verses about longing and resilience, their metaphors drawn from the emptiness around them. Imagine entire peoples weaving the desert into their identity, finding in its severity not despair but wisdom. The desert is a mirror of the human condition, reflecting back our fears, our endurance, our capacity for faith and imagination. And in this reflection, the desert becomes not just a landscape, but a teacher, inviting us to slow down, to listen, and to learn. As we move deeper into our story, the desert begins to shift in meaning from geology and climate into something that belongs as much to the human spirit as to the physical earth, for deserts are not only the results of pressure systems, plate tectonics, and atmospheric currents, but also mirrors where people have looked for understanding, guidance, and faith. Across cultures and through time, human beings have wandered into these vast silences and found not only survival but also story. And it is through these stories that deserts cease to be mere wastelands and instead become places of vision. The prophets of ancient texts often found their voices in the wilderness, whether it was Moses climbing a stony mountain beneath the burning sun to receive a covenant carved in stone, or the wandering of entire peoples who crossed deserts in search of promised lands, carrying with them the rhythm of footsteps across sand and the taste of dust on their tongues. In the sands of Arabia, Muhammad would retreat to a cave near the desert, where revelation transformed history forever. And so the desert in many traditions is not barren but fertile with meaning, a crucible where solitude allows the mind to open and the divine to speak. Among nomadic cultures like the Bedouin, whose tents rise and fall with the seasons, whose camels stride patiently across rolling dunes, the desert is both teacher and adversary, reminding them of the value of water, the gift of shade, the importance of patience. Their poetry is filled with metaphors born from the land, the endless horizon as a metaphor for longing, the oasis as a metaphor for hope, the camel as an emblem of perseverance, and so their cultural identity is inseparable from the sand itself, written not on paper but in the way they live and remember. To travel far away to the deserts of North America, one encounters different traditions, but the same reverence. The Hopi, the Navajo, the Pueblo peoples all see mesas and canyons as not empty places, but alive with spirit. For them, the desert is part of origin and balance, every butte and mesa carrying story, every dry wash a reminder of rain that will one day return. And rituals are performed to maintain harmony with the land. What looks like emptiness to outsiders is to them a living presence, a relative to be respected and cared for. And this respect is carried in ceremonies, songs, and sacred art that reflect the desert's power to shape meaning. In the Sahara, where the Tuareg wander, clad in indigo that dyes their skin, the desert is woven into identity as both challenge and beauty. Their songs tell of long journeys guided by stars, of oases where trade routes converged, of cities like Timbuktu where knowledge flourished at the edge of dunes, showing that, even in what may appear as lifeless expanses, human creativity, scholarship, and connection can thrive. The desert has also become a metaphor in the broader imagination. In literature, it is a place of exile and testing, where heroes are stripped of comfort and forced to find resilience within themselves. In dreams and poetry, it is a symbol of longing, silence, and truth. In spiritual practice, it is chosen intentionally. For seekers have known that when one goes into the desert, distractions fall away, and the essential reveals itself. Yet the desert is not only spiritual or symbolic, it is also cultural and practical, shaping human history in tangible ways. Consider the Silk Road, which could not have existed without caravans daring to cross the Gobi or the Taklamakan. Traders carried not just silk and spices but also stories, ideas, and languages. And at the desert oasis new forms of culture blossomed, nourished not by water but by exchange. Kashgar, Dunhuang, Samarkand, names that shimmer like mirages, were jewels of learning and art precisely because they were born in the spaces where desert travelers paused, rested, and shared. Myths of lost cities, buried beneath sand, also haunt the human imagination. From Ubar, the Atlantis of the sands, to Zerzura in the Sahara, to tales of Cibola in the deserts of the American Southwest. all whispering that the desert conceals secrets just beneath its surface, hiding treasure or wisdom, or both. Even the creatures of the desert have entered myth. The camel as the enduring servant, the scorpion as a guardian, the falcon as a messenger, the jackal or coyote as trickster and guide. In ancient Egypt, the desert was associated with Set, the god of chaos, embodying danger and disorder. Yet the sun itself, the life-bringer, rose across the desert each morning in Ra's golden chariot, turning desolation into daily renewal. In the stories of Arabia, jinn made of smokeless fire were said to roam the dunes, spirits unseen but felt, reminding wanderers that the desert holds mysteries beyond what the eye can perceive. As you drift into rest, think of this strange paradox. The desert, a place where survival is so tenuous, is at the same time one of the richest sources of meaning in human history. Prophets, poets, and traders have all found in its silence a kind of resonance that echoes through the ages. And perhaps this is why deserts matter so deeply to our imagination. They are landscapes that strip away the unnecessary, leaving only what cannot be ignored: thirst, faith, endurance, and the awareness of being very small beneath a vast sky. Let your thoughts move with the desert winds now, wandering across dunes where footsteps disappear quickly, across starlit plains where silence is so deep you can hear your own breath, across canyons whose walls glow like embers at sunset, and into that hush allow yourself to settle into sleep, knowing that like countless generations before us, you are carried by the desert not into emptiness, but into reflection and meaning. And yet, for all the spiritual stories and cultural traditions the desert has inspired, we must also turn gently back toward the earth itself, for beyond metaphor and myth lies an intricate ecological balance that is as delicate as it is profound. Deserts are not, as some might think, dead zones devoid of life. Rather, they are alive with species exquisitely adapted to scarcity, organisms that have sculpted their bodies and behaviors to survive in extremes where most creatures would quickly wither. Consider the saguaro cactus of the Sonoran Desert, tall and statuesque, raising arms toward the sky like a silent congregation. Beneath its green skin lies a ribbed body capable of swelling with thousands of liters of water after a single rain, storing precious moisture for months of drought. Around it, smaller cacti and succulents use spines not just for protection but also as shade, casting tiny shadows that reduce evaporation. Even their flowers open at night, when air is cooler and pollinators like bats or moths take flight, ensuring survival in an environment that tests every possibility. The animals of the desert are equally remarkable. The fennec fox of the Sahara, with ears oversized for its tiny body, radiates heat and listens keenly for the faintest rustle of prey beneath sand. The kangaroo rat in the Mojave never drinks water at all, obtaining all the moisture it needs from seeds, while its kidneys concentrate waste to an almost crystalline dryness, wasting nothing. Camels, those ships of the desert, are famous for their humps, not filled with water but fat, which allows them to metabolize energy slowly while conserving fluids. They can endure days without drinking, and when water is finally found, they can drink gallons at once, replenishing what was lost. Birds too adapt in subtle ways, some soaring great distances in search of food, others nesting in burrows to escape the midday blaze. Even the insects are ingenious, like the Namib beetle, which climbs dunes at dawn to let fog condense on its shell, channeling droplets toward its mouth. Every organism in the desert is an expression of resilience, a small miracle of adaptation, each survival strategy, a story written in the language of evolution. Beneath the soil, another hidden world unfolds. Many desert plants rest as seeds for years, waiting patiently for the rare rainfall that awakens them. When the rains do come, deserts can erupt in bloom so sudden and spectacular that whole landscapes transform from muted beige to carpets of violet, yellow, and crimson, as though the land itself remembers abundance and displays it proudly, even if only for days. This cycle of dormancy and sudden flourishing is not just beautiful but also essential, feeding insects, birds, and mammals in brief windows of plenty, sustaining webs of life that otherwise run on scarcity. And water, the eternal sculptor, plays a role here too. Flash floods may appear violent and destructive, racing through dry gullies with unstoppable force, but they also carve new channels, spread nutrients, and replenish underground aquifers that sustain oases. Even the dunes themselves are alive in a sense, moving slowly as winds push them across plains, reshaping valleys, swallowing old paths, and creating new ones. In this constant motion, deserts reveal themselves as dynamic rather than static, always shifting, always changing, always teaching that nothing is truly still. Humans, too, are part of this ecology, though our influence often disturbs the delicate balance. For millennia, desert peoples lived lightly, taking only what was necessary, their numbers small enough that the land could regenerate. But in recent centuries, new pressures have arisen. Grazing herds introduced in excess, groundwater pumped faster than rains can replenish, cities spreading into fragile ecosystems. The desert, once respected as a place of limits, is now too often tested beyond its capacity. Yet even here, lessons remain. Many desert cultures understood that survival required humility, not conquest. Their traditions of water sharing, careful migration, and respect for sacred sites embody a wisdom we might relearn. For deserts remind us that abundance can vanish quickly and that endurance depends on balance. As you drift in thought, imagine how quiet it must be in a desert night. The stars shining with unmatched clarity, the Milky Way arching from horizon to horizon, unbroken by light or cloud. In such silence, one can hear the faint call of a night bird, the rustle of a small mammal in the brush, the sigh of wind moving grains of sand. In such silence, one is reminded that the desert is not absence but presence, not void but vibrancy, subtle and fragile and alive. And perhaps, in reflecting on this living balance, we find ourselves too learning a kind of patience, a kind of stillness, recognizing that survival is not about conquering the harshness but about adapting, listening, and respecting the boundaries that nature sets. The desert's ecology, intricate and understated, whispers to us the truth that even in the most difficult conditions, life endures, and in that endurance lies a beauty both humbling and profound. So let your mind wander like the wind across dunes, like the root of a cactus reaching deep for hidden water, like the fox padding softly through moonlit sand. And in those images let sleep draw near, gentle and unhurried, as you too settle into the rhythms of resilience and rest. If we step back now and look not only at individual plants and animals but at entire systems, we begin to see deserts not as isolated anomalies but as integral parts of the planet's living network, connected by flows of air, water, and life that extend far beyond their apparent boundaries. It may surprise you to know that deserts play a critical role in global ecology, influencing climates thousands of kilometers away, and even nourishing distant ecosystems that seem to have nothing in common with dry sand and rock. Take the Sahara, for instance, often seen as the very archetype of desolation, a sea of dunes stretching from horizon to horizon. Each year, immense dust storms rise from its surface, carrying with them billions of tons of fine particles lifted high into the atmosphere. These clouds of dust do not merely vanish into the sky. They travel across oceans, drifting thousands of kilometers, until they fall like gentle rain upon faraway lands. Scientists have traced Saharan dust all the way to the Amazon rainforest, where it settles into the soil and replenishes phosphorus, one of the nutrients that the rainforest constantly loses in its heavy rains. Without the desert, the lush abundance of the Amazon might struggle to persist, reminding us again of the strange paradoxes of Earth, where the driest place feeds the wettest, and the silence of one land echoes in the music of another. In a similar way, deserts influence the atmosphere itself. Their surfaces reflect sunlight differently than forests or oceans, creating temperature contrasts that drive winds and shape weather patterns. Heat rising from sun-baked plains helps generate air currents that ripple outward, affecting rainfall in neighboring regions. Even the shifting of dunes and the release of dust particles can alter how clouds form, subtly shaping the balance between storm and drought far beyond the desert's edge. These processes remind us that deserts are not self-contained but part of a vast choreography in which every ecosystem, no matter how extreme, plays its role. Yet deserts are also vulnerable, and the pressures of climate change are pushing them toward transformations that raise unsettling questions about the future. Rising global temperatures intensify evaporation, reduce soil moisture, and make dry regions drier still, causing boundaries of deserts to creep outward. This process, known as desertification, threatens not only wild ecosystems but also human communities that depend on fragile grasslands and semi-arid areas for their herds and crops. In parts of the Sahel, the belt of land just south of the Sahara, farmers face the creeping advance of sand, their once fertile fields turning to dust. In China, too, deserts like the Gobi have been expanding, swallowing villages and pushing people to migrate. Desertification is not only about sand, it is about soil losing its vitality, about grasslands stripped bare by overgrazing, about forests cut down so that rains wash away topsoil, leaving nothing but dryness behind. The ecological role of deserts, therefore, is double-edged. They are vital components of Earth's balance, but when they expand unnaturally through human pressure and climate disruption, they become warnings of imbalance, symptoms of a planet pushed beyond resilience. Still, there are signs of hope, because humans are also learning to work with deserts in ways that restore rather than diminish. Projects such as the Great Green Wall in Africa seek to plant trees across the Sahel, not only to halt the march of sand but also to stabilize soils, capture carbon, and provide livelihoods. In other regions, sustainable grazing, careful water management, and even traditional practices revived from indigenous knowledge are helping land heal. These efforts reveal that deserts are not simply threats but teachers, showing us what happens when limits are ignored, and what can be possible when respect is renewed. Consider also the surprising ways deserts generate life far beyond themselves. Desert rivers, though rare, can be lifelines not only for local plants and animals but also for migratory species. Birds flying across continents rely on desert oases as resting places, their bodies carrying seeds from one ecosystem to another. Even in the oceans, deserts leave their mark. Dust falling on the sea can fertilize plankton blooms, tiny floating organisms that form the foundation of marine food webs. In this way, a grain of sand lifted from the Sahara might eventually help feed a whale in the Atlantic, a reminder that the web of life is woven with invisible threads connecting places we might never think to link. As you listen, perhaps lying in the quiet of your own room, consider how extraordinary it is that your breath tonight might contain particles once lifted from a desert half a world away. Consider how rain falling in your country might have been influenced by heat rising from a desert plain, how the food on your table might depend indirectly on nutrients carried across oceans by winds from distant sands. The desert, far from being remote and irrelevant, is a hidden partner in your own life, a quiet presence shaping the world around you in ways subtle yet profound. And so, when we ask whether deserts will continue to grow, whether they will remain stable or expand with the warming of the earth, we are asking not only about distant horizons of sand, but about the future of all lands, all people, all ecosystems. For if deserts expand too far, the balance of air, water, and soil shifts everywhere. If deserts are respected, understood, and allowed to play their role without being forced beyond their limits, then their gifts, the dust that fertilizes, the winds that balance, the silence that teaches, can continue to flow. And so, as you let your mind settle, imagine the invisible rivers of dust crossing the sky. Imagine the breath of winds linking deserts to forests. Imagine the delicate thread that connects dryness and abundance, silence and song. In that vision, the desert reveals itself not as an isolated world, but as part of the Earth's grand story, in which every place matters, every silence carries meaning, and even the most barren of lands is full of hidden generosity. Let that thought ease you further toward rest, knowing that you too are part of this interconnected web, held gently by a planet whose extremes balance into harmony, if only we listen and learn. And as we drift further into this journey of sand and silence, it is worth pausing to notice how deserts are not only shaped by Earth systems, but also continue to shape human history in ways both ancient and unfolding. For deserts have always been thresholds, places that challenge and transform those who cross them, and their influence stretches into trade, culture, art, and even the way civilizations rise and fall. Imagine for a moment the caravans that once threaded across the Sahara, long lines of camels moving slowly, each laden with salt, gold, ivory, or spices, their bells ringing softly as they walked beneath a punishing sun. These routes were not only commercial but cultural highways, carrying stories, languages, and faiths that spread from one region to another, weaving together the Mediterranean world with sub-Saharan Africa, the Middle East with distant markets beyond. It was through deserts that great cities like Timbuktu rose, not in spite of the harshness but because of it, for the desert's difficulty gave value to the goods that passed through, and the oases became gathering places where scholars and merchants alike exchanged knowledge. In Asia, the Gobi and Taklamakan deserts played a similar role, formidable barriers that caravans braved as they carried silk, porcelain, and tea along the routes that came to be known as the Silk Road. Here, too, the deserts acted as both challenge and opportunity, filtering travelers through narrow paths where oases like Dunhuang flourished, its cave temples filled with Buddhist art created by the wealth and devotion of those who paused to rest on their long journeys. Without deserts, the shape of global history would have been entirely different, for these arid expanses forced ingenuity, demanded cooperation, and created points of encounter where the world's cultures mingled. Yet deserts are also places where empires have faltered, for armies unprepared for the heat and the scarcity found themselves undone not by enemies, but by the land itself. Alexander the Great's march through the Gedrosian desert cost countless lives, his army weakened by thirst and exhaustion, showing that even the mightiest conquerors must bow to the authority of sand and sun. In later centuries, colonial powers attempting to draw lines across North Africa or Arabia often underestimated the resilience of desert peoples and the difficulty of moving through lands that gave no easy passage. The desert thus emerges in history as both conduit and barrier, shaping events in ways that remind us of its silent strength. Even today, deserts continue to influence human endeavor, though the context has shifted. They are places where new frontiers of science are explored, where astronomers build observatories high on desert plateaus, drawn by skies free of moisture and light pollution, where telescopes peer deeper into the universe than almost anywhere else on Earth. They are also sites of innovation in energy, as solar farms spread across sun-drenched expanses, capturing light that falls in abundance and transforming it into power. In Chile's Atacama Desert, solar arrays glisten like artificial oases, part of humanity's attempt to harness the desert's severity for sustainable ends. And yet, even as we innovate, we must remain cautious, for the fragility of desert ecosystems means that heavy footprints linger long after we pass. Mining, drilling, and overuse of scarce water threaten to unravel balances that took millennia to form. And so the desert teaches once again the lesson of restraint, a reminder that abundance of sun does not equal abundance of resources. Beyond the economic and scientific, deserts also hold deep resonance in art and literature, continuing to inspire the imagination. Painters have sought to capture the strange geometries of dunes, the endless gradations of ochre and gold, the way light shifts subtly across barren hills. Writers from T.E. Lawrence to Antoine de Saint-Exupéry have written of their desert experiences, the former turning his journeys into tales of warfare and alliance, the latter transforming his solitude into allegory in The Little Prince, where the desert is the stage for questions about loneliness, friendship, and meaning. Poets, too, have used the desert as symbol, sometimes of desolation, sometimes of renewal. For in the desert, stripped of distractions, the essence of existence feels closer, sharper, undeniable. Even music has been touched by desert landscapes, from traditional Bedouin songs that echo across dunes to modern compositions that draw upon desert rhythms to evoke stillness and space. In each medium, the desert appears not only as scenery but as muse, reminding us that its silence can be as eloquent as words. And so, as you lie here listening, perhaps letting your thoughts soften, you can see how deserts are far more than lonely spaces at the edges of maps. They are crossroads, classrooms, challenges, and sanctuaries, shaping human endeavor as much as they are shaped by Earth itself. They connect distant continents with threads of dust and trade. They humble armies and empires. They guide seekers of truth and scholars of the stars. They inspire artists, poets, and dreamers. And all the while, they remain themselves, vast and patient, indifferent yet essential. To think of deserts this way is to understand them as teachers whose lessons shift depending on what one seeks: survival, profit, revelation, or beauty. And perhaps this is why deserts continue to draw us. For they offer not comfort but clarity, not ease but meaning. Let that thought linger as you close your eyes a little more deeply, imagining caravans moving like constellations across sand, telescopes gazing into galaxies from dry mountaintops, ancient poets reciting verses under starlit skies, and modern engineers tilting mirrors of glass to catch the endless sun. All of it belongs to the desert. All of it flows from the silence of sand and stone. And all of it reminds us that even the harshest places on earth are woven into the softest dreams of humankind. And still, the desert offers yet another lesson, one rooted in time itself. For deserts are not merely the landscapes we see today, but archives of Earth's long story, keeping within their rocks and sands the imprints of ancient seas, vanished forests, and climates that shifted long before humans came to wander beneath the stars. To walk across a desert is often to walk across the floor of an ocean that dried millions of years ago, the limestone cliffs of places like the Sahara or the Mojave revealing fossils of corals and shellfish that once thrived in waters where now only dunes remain. These reminders tell us that deserts are not eternal wastelands, but phases in a planet's ever-changing skin, stages in a cycle of wet and dry, life and dormancy that has unfolded across eons. The Sahara, vast and unrelenting, has itself transformed multiple times, at intervals when Earth's tilt and orbit shifted monsoon patterns, so that what is now a sea of sand once blossomed with lakes, rivers, and grasslands filled with hippos, crocodiles, and human settlements that painted their lives on cave walls. These rock paintings still endure, preserved in dry air, showing figures dancing, hunting, swimming, their very existence a gentle reminder that the desert is not fixed but fluid, a place where climate and culture rise and fall like the dunes themselves. The Atacama in Chile, one of the driest deserts on Earth, contains valleys so arid that raindrops have not touched them for centuries, and yet within the salt-crusted soil scientists have found microbes clinging to survival, their chemistry offering clues to how life might persist on Mars. Here, the desert becomes not only a mirror of Earth's past, but a window into possible futures, a laboratory where researchers can test the boundaries of endurance, imagining how life might exist on other planets. In Australia, the red heart of the outback carries stories written not just in geology, but in the dreamtime of Aboriginal tradition, where every rock and dry riverbed holds memory of ancestral beings whose journeys created the land. The desert here is both scientific archive and spiritual map, guiding not only the understanding of origins, but also the pathways of people who navigate by story as much as by stars. Such intersections of science and culture remind us that deserts, though harsh, are also keepers of memory. Their lack of rain preserves ruins and artifacts with extraordinary fidelity, so that ancient settlements, tools, and even human remains endure where in wetter climates they would have long decayed. Archaeologists treasure deserts for this reason, unearthing mummies in Egypt's sands, tracing caravan routes across Arabia by the pottery fragments left behind, discovering forgotten cities buried by dunes. Each discovery is a whisper from the past carried forward into the present, a reminder that deserts have seen civilizations come and go, and in their silence they hold the echoes of all those who passed before us. But deserts also remind us that change is constant. For just as seas can vanish and grasslands can dry, so too can deserts bloom again. In certain cycles, rainfall may return, lakes may refill, vegetation may spread. Already in parts of the Sahara, there are hints of greening tied to shifting climate patterns, suggesting that deserts themselves are not permanent verdicts but chapters in a longer story written by Earth's restless systems. This cyclical nature challenges us to see deserts not as static emptiness but as dynamic theaters, where time stretches far beyond our lifetimes, where patience is measured not in decades but in millennia. And in this perspective, deserts become meditations on impermanence, teaching us that what feels eternal is in truth always becoming something new. As you imagine this, think of the Sahara not as an endless sea of sand, but as a land that once shimmered with water, that will one day again host rivers and grasslands, that today simply rests in a phase of dryness. Think of the Atacama as a fragment of Mars on Earth, whispering of life's possibilities beyond our planet. Think of the petroglyphs and rock art scattered across deserts worldwide, where human hands long ago carved stories into stone that still remain, untouched by rain, unblurred by time. These are the gifts of deserts as keepers of memory, as teachers of patience, as mirrors of transformation. And if you close your eyes now, perhaps you can feel the slow passage of ages in the warmth of sand beneath a setting sun, in the cool starlight spilling across empty plains, in the silence that holds both the past and the future at once. The desert asks us to be still, to listen, to remember that we too are brief travelers across its ancient face, and in this recognition, we may find peace. Yet, as we rest in that silence, another thought arises, one that ties the story of deserts not only to the past, but to the present moment. For the sands are shifting in ways that touch our world more urgently than we may realize. The question of whether deserts will keep growing is not just poetic wonder, but a scientific concern. For the edges of deserts are living boundaries, places where the balance between vegetation and sand, rainfall and drought, human use and natural resilience is delicately maintained. In many regions, this balance has been strained, and the line between fertile land and barren expanse has begun to move. This process, called desertification, is not the birth of a new natural desert, but the spread of desert-like conditions into once productive areas due to overgrazing, deforestation, and the slow exhaustion of soil by human activity. In the Sahel, that fragile band of land south of the Sahara, stretching across Africa, millions of people live in a zone where rainfall is scarce and unpredictable, where herders move their cattle in search of grass and farmers pray for the return of rain. Here, small shifts in climate combine with pressure from population growth and land use, creating conditions where soil dries, crops fail, and the desert seems to creep forward. It is not the desert itself expanding, but rather the land losing its capacity to hold life. Scientists studying these regions speak of feedback loops, where the removal of vegetation exposes the soil, the exposed soil reflects more sunlight and loses moisture more quickly. Rainfall decreases further, and the cycle deepens. And yet, this is not an unstoppable tide. In Niger, in Mali, in Burkina Faso, communities have worked to reclaim land by planting trees, building small stone barriers to capture rainwater, and restoring traditional practices of rotation and rest. Over decades, millions of trees have returned, shading the soil, stabilizing it, drawing water back into the ground. The desert can give way, not by force but by patience and care. Similar efforts are taking place in China, where vast belts of trees are being planted along the Gobi Desert's edge, creating what is called the Great Green Wall, a living barrier against sandstorms and encroachment. These human responses show us that while deserts themselves are natural, desertification is a challenge we can resist, a story we can rewrite if we listen to the lessons of the land. And there is another dimension to this question. For as the climate warms globally, patterns of rainfall are shifting in ways both subtle and profound. Some models suggest that dry regions may grow drier, that storms may become less frequent but more intense, that the balance-sustaining ecosystems on the desert's edge may tilt toward dryness. Already in parts of the Middle East, prolonged drought has strained communities and landscapes, revealing how delicate the harmony truly is. Yet in other places, unexpected greening occurs. For warming can also shift monsoons or melt mountain snows that feed rivers, creating temporary abundance. The deserts, therefore, are not merely growing or shrinking, they are changing, reshaping in response to forces beyond our immediate perception. Imagine the winds carrying Saharan dust across the Atlantic, settling on the Amazon rainforest and fertilizing its soil. A reminder that even the driest places give life to the greenest. Imagine satellites orbiting above, watching the pulse of vegetation bloom and fade across the Sahel with each season, mapping where resilience still holds and where fragility cracks open. These images, gathered silently from the sky, are like the desert's heartbeat, a record of its struggles and its endurance. And in this story of change, humans are not merely witnesses but participants, both causing harm and seeking healing, both pressing against the desert's margins and learning to adapt within them. For people who live in deserts, adaptation is not new. It is as old as the first shelters built of palm fronds, the first wells dug into dry earth, the first trade routes that carried salt and gold across shifting dunes. What is new is the scale of challenge, the sheer number of people now dependent on fragile lands, the pressure of modern industry and global climate change layered upon timeless struggles. And so the question becomes not only whether deserts will keep growing, but how we will choose to meet them, whether with extraction and neglect or with reverence and balance. To lie here now, imagining these vast dry lands, is to feel the weight of these choices. The desert does not move with haste. It shifts over centuries. It transforms over millennia. Yet our actions in a single generation may tilt its story. And perhaps that is why deserts feel so solemn, so humbling. For they remind us of our smallness in time, while quietly revealing the largeness of our responsibility. Close your eyes then, and let the image of a horizon filled with dunes rise before you. Picture the boundary where sand meets grass, where a lone tree stands against the sky, where people gather in the evening to share food and hope beneath a canopy of stars. Picture that edge, fragile and strong, vulnerable and resilient, and know that the story of deserts is also the story of us, of how we live upon this earth, of how we honor or ignore the cycles that sustain us. And as you drift toward rest, let the desert's stillness settle into you, reminding you that while questions of growth and change press upon us, there is also quiet, there is also patience, there is also the possibility of balance if only we listen to the whisper of sand and wind. To think of balance in the desert is to think of the delicate ways in which life has learned not only to survive, but to thrive in the most improbable of conditions. For every cactus spine, every reptile's scaled skin, every nocturnal habit of birds and mammals is a testimony to adaptation, written with exquisite precision across countless generations. Consider the kangaroo rat of North America's deserts, a small creature that never drinks water yet lives long, relying entirely on seeds and the moisture they yield within its tiny body. Its kidneys are miracles of conservation, drawing out every drop, its habits perfectly attuned to moonlit foraging when the air is cool and predators less watchful. Or imagine the fennec fox of the Sahara, its oversized ears serving not only to catch the faintest rustle of prey beneath sand, but also to radiate excess heat into the night air, keeping its small body cool beneath the sun's relentless glare. Plants too carry genius, for in deserts across the world, they have learned to spread roots wide and shallow to capture the briefest rainfall, or to plunge them deep into hidden aquifers that store water from centuries past. The saguaro cactus, towering like a sentinel in the Sonoran Desert, can swell with gallons of water after a storm, storing life within its ribs for long droughts ahead, while its blossoms feed bats and its fruits nourish birds and people alike. In Australia, spinifex grasses dominate vast stretches, resilient to fire and dryness, binding fragile soil against the wind. In the Middle East, the date palm has stood as a companion to humanity for millennia, offering fruit, shade, and wood, thriving where few trees dare. These organisms do not see the desert as hostile but as home, shaping their lives to its rhythms, building symphonies of survival where outsiders might see only silence. And in this we find yet another reason why deserts matter. For they remind us of the brilliance of life's adaptability, of the creativity etched into DNA, of the boundless inventiveness that emerges when existence is tested by scarcity. To sit beneath a desert sky is to know that every chirp, every rustle, every green leaf is a victory, a triumph of persistence. And this persistence is not only biological but cultural, for human communities too have grown in rhythm with the desert, fashioning lives of balance that speak to an ancient wisdom often overlooked in the rush of modernity. The Bedouin, who journey across Arabia, know how to find water where eyes see none, how to navigate by stars that cut diamond paths across night skies. The Sand people of southern Africa understand the stories of plants, the movements of animals, the language of wind and sand. The Pueblo peoples of the American Southwest built homes of clay and stone that remained cool through blistering heat, aligning them with the cycles of sun and season. Each of these ways of life is a dialogue with the desert, a conversation carried across centuries in which survival is not mere endurance but a kind of partnership. Yet this partnership is fragile. requiring humility, requiring respect. Modern ways of living, extracting fossil fuels, building sprawling cities that demand water in volumes deserts cannot naturally supply, often clash with the desert's limits. Las Vegas, Phoenix, Dubai, Doha, all stand as striking examples of human ambition flourishing in arid lands, yet all depend on vast engineering, on aquifers and rivers, diverted from afar, on desalination plants that turn salt water to fresh water at tremendous cost. These cities glitter brilliantly against the sand, yet their lights cast questions into the future. Can they sustain themselves in balance with their environment? Or will the demands of millions of people press too heavily upon delicate systems? The desert itself does not answer. It simply waits, as it always has, as it always will. And perhaps that is why, in this stillness, we can find lessons of patience and humility, lessons that remind us of the costs of ignoring limits and the beauty of honoring them. Think of it this way. In deserts, every creature, every plant, every human tradition is built upon listening to the scarce rain, to the movements of animals, to the cycles of stars, to the whisper of the land itself. To thrive here is to attend carefully, to take only what is offered, to give back in respect. As you drift toward sleep, imagine yourself listening to, not rushing, not demanding, but resting in rhythm with the desert. Imagine the slow unfolding of a cactus flower at dusk, its petals opening to bats that swoop in with gentle wings. Imagine the quiet paw prints of a fox weaving across sand, the wind erasing them as morning rises. Imagine the silhouettes of people gathered around a fire in the cool desert night, telling stories that stretch back beyond memory, stories that remind them who they are, stories that tie them to land and sky. In this way, the desert becomes not merely a place but a teacher, a vast open classroom where silence is the chalkboard and patience the lesson. And in that lesson, there is rest, for it tells us that not everything must be hurried, that not all questions demand immediate answers, that some mysteries are best held gently, allowed to unfold in their own time, like stars appearing one by one in a deepening sky. And perhaps the greatest mystery of deserts is the paradox they hold between emptiness and abundance, between silence and story. For while to an untrained eye the desert may appear vacant, in truth it is filled with hidden richness, with networks of life and meaning that reveal themselves only to those who linger, who listen, who learn to look slowly. Beneath the sand, seeds can lie dormant for years, even decades, waiting for the rarest of rains. And when that water comes, deserts that seemed utterly barren burst into sudden bloom, carpets of flowers stretching as far as the horizon, dazzling the senses with color and fragrance where before there was only dust. This transformation, known as a desert bloom, occurs in places like the Atacama of Chile, the American Southwest, or the Karoo of South Africa, where for a brief season the desert wears a cloak of green and gold, reminding us that what appears lifeless may simply be resting, conserving, waiting for the moment to shine. It is the same with animals that time their life cycles to these fleeting bursts of abundance. Frogs that emerge from hardened soil to sing and breed in temporary pools, insects that hatch and spread in dazzling numbers before fading once again into silence, birds that migrate great distances to seize the brief banquet of seeds and nectar. In these moments, the desert is not just surviving but celebrating, and those who are fortunate enough to witness such spectacles often describe them as miracles, as though life itself had conspired to remind us of resilience, of beauty hidden within patience. Yet even in times of barrenness, abundance flows in quieter forms, for the desert is also abundant in sky. There are few places on earth where the heavens appear so vivid, where stars burn so bright, where the Milky Way stretches like a luminous river across the darkness. In the Atacama, in the high plateaus of Arizona, in the vast Australian outback, astronomers have placed telescopes because the air is dry, the atmosphere steady, and the light pollution absent. Here the desert becomes not only a home for life, but a window into the universe, a place where the cosmos reveals itself with stunning clarity. To lie upon warm sand and look upward is to see infinity, to feel the vastness of time and space, to know that deserts are not empty but are filled with stars, with stories, with the immeasurable wonder of existence itself. And perhaps this is why so many cultures have infused deserts with mythic significance, for when people looked out at endless dunes or up into unbroken skies, they felt the presence of forces beyond themselves, forces that shaped gods and legends. In ancient Egypt, the desert beyond the fertile Nile Valley was both feared and revered, a realm of chaos and testing, where the god Seth reigned, yet also the place where the sun god Ra journeyed each night through darkness to rise again in the morning. For the Navajo and Hopi, the desert is sacred, a place alive with spirits, a canvas upon which creation unfolded. In Islamic tradition, the desert is where revelations were received, where prophets walked, where silence made space for divine words. In Australian Aboriginal Dreamtime stories, desert rocks, rivers, and dunes are not inert landscapes but living presences, connected to ancestors who sang the world into being. These cultural meanings are not mere imagination but reflections of a truth that the desert whispers, that in silence one can hear more deeply, that in emptiness one can see more clearly, that in scarcity value is heightened. The desert is thus not only ecological but spiritual, not only physical but symbolic, carrying lessons that transcend its boundaries and reach into the human heart. And as you let your breathing slow, as your mind drifts further toward rest, you may imagine yourself walking across such a landscape, feeling the sand cool beneath your feet as the sun sets, hearing the distant call of a night bird, seeing stars prick the sky one by one until the heavens are aflame with constellations. You may imagine ancient travelers pausing as you pause, resting as you rest, sharing in the same stillness, guided by the same stars. You may feel that you too are part of this timeless story, connected to the desert, to the sky, to the endless unfolding of life in places where life should not be yet always is. And in this awareness there is comfort, for it reminds us that scarcity does not mean absence, that silence does not mean void, that stillness does not mean nothingness. The desert holds abundance, but it teaches us to look differently, to measure not in obvious richness but in hidden treasures, to listen not to noise but to whispers, to trust that even in dryness there is life, even in darkness there is light, even in emptiness there is meaning. And so we begin to see deserts not as barren interruptions in Earth's story, but as essential chapters, each one contributing something vital to the balance of the planet. For deserts regulate climate, reflect sunlight back into space, circulate dust that fertilizes oceans and forests, and hold within their silence the mechanisms by which life learns resilience. Consider the Sahara once more, not only as a sea of sand but as a vast engine influencing weather across continents. For each year winds lift billions of tons of dust from its surface, carrying fine particles across the Atlantic, where they settle upon the Amazon rainforest and replenish soils that rain would otherwise leach of nutrients. In this way, the desert gives life to the jungle, dryness sustaining abundance, silence sustaining song. Other winds carry desert dust northward into Europe, sometimes painting skies orange, reminding distant people that the desert is never isolated, that even from afar its breath can touch their lives. In the Gobi Desert, storms sweep toward China and Korea, shaping skies and soils in ways both challenging and sustaining, while in the deserts of North America, heat rising from sun-baked land fuels atmospheric circulation that influences rains across the continent. Deserts, then, are not empty but interconnected, vast nodes in Earth's circulatory system, pumping dust, heat, and wind across hemispheres. To reflect upon this is to realize that deserts are not marginal lands but central forces, their silence masking immense power. They are, in their way, great lungs of the planet, inhaling and exhaling not oxygen but dust and heat, exhaling them into a global system that depends upon their rhythm. And here again we return to the question of growth, of whether deserts will expand, and what that might mean not only for those who live at their edges but for the entire Earth. If deserts grow larger, if fertile lands give way to dryness, then the circulation of dust, the reflection of sunlight, the balance of climate will shift in turn, with consequences felt far from the shifting dunes. But if deserts shrink, if greening expands, then those balances change differently. redistributing heat and altering rainfall across continents. In either case, deserts remind us that Earth is not a collection of separate places, but a single breathing whole, each region tied to the others in ways both subtle and profound. And in this realization, perhaps we also find a certain calm, for it shows us that nothing exists alone, that even the starkest emptiness is connected, that even the most silent landscape is part of a conversation that spans oceans and skies. This interconnectedness is mirrored in culture, for humans across time have turned to deserts not only as challenges to be endured, but as symbols of endurance, as metaphors for testing, as stages upon which transformation unfolds. In literature and scripture, deserts are places of exile and revelation, where prophets wander, where seekers find clarity, where silence strips away distraction and leaves only what matters. The Hebrew Bible tells of 40 years in the wilderness, a journey of trial and refinement, where identity was forged. The Quran speaks of revelations received in desert silence, words that would guide millions. Christian monks withdrew into desert caves, believing that emptiness opened the way to divine presence. Modern travelers, too, though often seeking adventure rather than asceticism, describe desert journeys as experiences of perspective, where the vastness humbles, where solitude sharpens awareness, where the horizon expands the soul. To lie beneath a desert sky is to feel small, yes, but also to feel infinite, to sense that one is both fleeting and eternal. Perhaps this is why so many myths describe deserts as thresholds, liminal spaces, where ordinary reality gives way to something beyond, where transformation occurs. The desert is both harsh and sacred, both punishing and healing, both isolating and unifying. It embodies opposites, and in holding them together, it invites reflection upon our own contradictions, upon the ways we too are both fragile and enduring. And as you listen to these stories in the quiet of night, as you imagine sand stretching endless before you, perhaps you too feel that sense of threshold, as though the desert whispers not only about itself but about you, about your own journey, your own resilience, your own connection to something larger. The desert, after all, does not demand answers. It simply offers space, space in which to ask, in which to rest, in which to wonder. And in this space, as your eyes grow heavy, you may let the vast horizon of dunes merge with the vast horizon of dreams, carrying you gently into sleep as stars burn silently above. When we reflect on deserts as thresholds, it becomes natural to notice how often they serve as places of crossing, of movement, of transition. For deserts are not only destinations but corridors, routes through which people, animals, winds, and even time itself have traveled, shaping civilizations and stories. Across the Sahara stretch the ancient trans-Saharan trade routes, where caravans of camels laden with salt, gold, ivory, and textiles move slowly between West Africa and the Mediterranean, their journeys guided by stars and wells, their survival dependent on trust and cooperation. The desert here was not a barrier but a bridge, linking cultures, exchanging not only goods but ideas, languages, and faiths. In Central Asia, the Taklamakan and Gobi deserts formed formidable expanses along the Silk Road. Yet traders, pilgrims, and explorers passed through, stopping at oases where cultures mingled, temples rose, and manuscripts were copied. These oases were jewels of life in seas of sand, and their memory lingers still in the ruins of cities like Dunhuang, where caves filled with painted Buddhas testify to centuries of travelers finding refuge on the desert's edge. Even animals use deserts as corridors. Migratory birds trace invisible pathways across them, pausing briefly at wetlands or springs, their wings carrying seeds and nutrients from one biome to another. Winds too act as travelers, crossing deserts and oceans alike, carrying Saharan dust to the Amazon, carrying spores and minerals across hemispheres, making deserts messengers as well as dwellings. And in this sense, deserts are places of exchange, not emptiness, their silence concealing the constant flow of life and meaning across their breadth. To walk across a desert, whether alone or with a caravan, is to join this timeless movement, to become part of a rhythm that stretches back millennia, a rhythm older than cities, older than nations, older than memory. And perhaps that is why deserts awaken such awe, for in their stillness they carry so much history, So much connection, so much silent traffic of life. This idea of crossing is not only physical but spiritual, for deserts often mark inner journeys, passages from one state of being to another. Think of Moses wandering in the wilderness, Muhammad receiving revelation in the cave of Hira, Jesus fasting 40 days beneath the desert sun, the Buddha's path through silence that parallels the barren landscapes of India's dry plains. Each story reflects transformation through trial, solitude, and listening, suggesting that deserts invite not only passage but renewal, not only challenge but clarity. Even in literature, from T.E. Lawrence's reflections on the Arabian sands to Antoine de Saint-Exupéry's tale of The Little Prince meeting a pilot stranded in the desert, the dry expanse becomes a place where ordinary assumptions fall away, leaving open the possibility of wonder. And so, when we ask whether deserts will keep growing, we are not only asking about climate and soil but also about how far their metaphor will continue to stretch into human imagination. Will deserts expand not only across land but across our sense of meaning, offering ever new lessons in resilience, in humility, in patience? Or will we, in our haste, see them only as threats, as voids, as obstacles to be overcome? Perhaps the answer lies in how we choose to walk through them, whether in reverence or in disregard, whether in listening or in conquest. For deserts can be unforgiving when treated with arrogance, but generous when approached with humility. They can strip away illusions, but they can also reveal what truly sustains. Imagine, then, standing at the edge of a desert at dusk, your shadow long across the sand, the air cooling after a day of heat, the horizon glowing with the last colors of the sun. You feel both hesitation and invitation, for to step forward is to enter a place without guarantees, a place where each choice matters, where each resource must be honored, where each pause can bring insight. And as the stars begin to appear, as the silence deepens, you realize that deserts do not merely test endurance, they reveal presence. They uncover what lies beneath. They remind us of the essentials. And perhaps, as you listen now in the quiet of night, the desert is whispering to you too, telling you that in your own life, there are thresholds, crossings, passages that require patience, humility, and attention, that the desert's vast horizon is not only out there but also within. And with this thought, you may rest more deeply, letting the desert's endless expanse dissolve into the darkness of your dreams, where crossings continue in gentler ways. If deserts are thresholds and passages, they are also mirrors, reflecting not only the sky above, but the inner landscapes of those who enter them. For to gaze upon a vast stretch of dunes or a cracked plain is to see a likeness of one's own uncertainties, one's own longings, one's own capacity for silence. When a traveler stands in the heart of a desert, the world's noise fades, and what remains is the sound of breath, the crunch of sand beneath feet, the faint whistle of wind across stone. In this way, deserts strip life to its simplest rhythms, reminding us of what is essential: water, shelter, companionship, and awareness. Many have spoken of the mirage, that shimmering illusion that bends light into the image of water, yet perhaps the greater mirage is the one within us, the endless images of desires, worries, and fears that flicker across the mind when stripped of distraction. In the desert, such illusions can no longer be sustained. The horizon is too honest, the silence too deep, the light too unrelenting. And so, deserts invite not only survival but awakening. For to live a single day under their sun is to understand the fragility of the body and the strength of the spirit. Bedouin poets sang of this truth, their verses weaving images of tents under stars, of loyal camels, of the sweetness of a rare spring after weeks of thirst. Indigenous desert peoples from Australia to the Kalahari spoke of dream time, of ancestral stories written not on parchment but on rock and sand, maps of meaning embedded in landscapes others might call empty. These stories reveal that deserts are not voids but texts, sacred scripts to be read with patience, each dune a letter, each canyon a phrase, each oasis a punctuation of life's continuity. To those who learn the language, deserts speak fluently, offering guidance as sure as any book, as timeless as any scripture. And yet, for those who rush, deserts remain mute, their lessons hidden, their treasures concealed. Perhaps this is why so many spiritual seekers have been drawn to deserts. For here, the absence of abundance becomes its own form of wealth, the silence its own kind of wisdom, the stillness its own sanctuary. Imagine walking through such silence at dawn, the first rays of sun painting the sand in shades of rose and gold, the air cool against your skin, the sky vast and pale. In that moment, the desert becomes a cathedral, its roof the heavens, its altar the horizon, its music the faint hum of the earth itself. You may find yourself praying without words, listening without effort, resting without sleep, simply aware of being. And this awareness, born of emptiness, is itself a gift, a reminder that life's meaning often emerges not from what we possess, but from what we release. In this way, deserts are teachers of surrender, of patience, of trust, showing us that even in harshness there can be grace, even in scarcity there can be beauty, even in silence there can be song. And so, when night comes and stars blaze across the blackness, when the Milky Way arches overhead like a river of fire, you may lie upon the cooling ground and realize that you are not small at all, but part of something endless, something that stretches as far as the dunes, as deep as the silence, as bright as the stars. The desert, then, is not only a place outside you, but also a place within, a landscape of spirit that invites you to wander, to question, to rest. And as you drift now into your own inner desert, eyes closed, body still, let the sands of thought settle, let the winds of worry quiet, let the vast horizon of peace spread gently through you, carrying you into sleep as ancient as the earth itself. To understand deserts fully, we must look not only at the myths they inspire or the silence they hold, but also at the intricate webs of life that manage to persist within them. For though they seem barren at first glance, deserts are teeming with quiet resilience, every creature and plant carrying within itself the story of endurance. Consider the cactus, swollen with water stored in its thick green flesh, its spines both shield and shade, its blossoms sudden bursts of color against the monotone sands. Consider the kangaroo rat of North America, so small, so unassuming, yet capable of living its whole life without ever drinking liquid water, drawing instead every drop it needs from the seeds it eats. Think of the acacia tree in the Sahara, its roots plunging deep beneath the surface, reaching hidden streams while its branches spread wide to offer shade to herders and wanderers. Each adaptation is a quiet miracle, proof that even in what seems impossible, life finds a way. These beings teach us that survival is not about conquest, but cooperation, about bending gently to the rhythm of scarcity rather than resisting it. When night falls, the desert wakes anew with movement. Foxes darting, owls gliding silently, snakes warming themselves on rocks that still hold the sun's memory. The stars above mirror the creatures below, both constellations of light scattered across an expanse, reminding us that deserts are not empty but alive, in ways that require patience and attentiveness to see. Yet how often we humans overlook this vitality, blinded by the scale of dunes and the heat of days. In our stories, deserts become metaphors for emptiness, for loneliness, for struggle. But if we pause long enough to look, we find instead persistence, balance, and beauty. Even sand, shifting endlessly in the wind, plays its part, sculpting landscapes that are never still, dunes that move like waves across the land. Over centuries, these movements carve out patterns as intricate as those left by rivers, reminding us that nothing in nature is truly fixed, that change is the only permanence. For scientists, studying deserts is like reading a chronicle of Earth's climate, their sediments storing records of rainfall and drought, their fossils revealing creatures long gone, their salt pans telling of vanished lakes and seas. For storytellers, deserts are dreamscapes, the backdrop of trials and revelations, the setting where heroes are tested and truths revealed. For those who live within them, deserts are not just landscapes but lifescapes, providing food, medicine, shelter, and spiritual orientation. Among the Tuareg, the Sahara is not a void but a home, its routes and dunes as familiar as a city street, its oases as vital as wells in a village. Among Aboriginal peoples, the Australian desert is a tapestry of songlines, each path sung into being by ancestors, each rock and dune infused with memory and meaning. These perspectives remind us that our understanding of deserts is always shaped by how we approach them. From afar, they appear harsh and lifeless. Up close, they reveal themselves as delicate, complex, and profoundly generous to those who listen. And as we return to the broader question, why do deserts exist? And will they keep growing? We see that deserts are not accidents but outcomes, not punishments but processes, shaped by the interplay of sun, wind, ocean, and time. They are chapters in Earth's great story, vital both in their challenges and their gifts. The answer to whether they will grow lies in the choices humanity makes. For while deserts shift naturally with climate cycles, our actions now burning forests, warming the planet, misusing land, push their boundaries faster than they would move on their own. To sleep beneath the desert sky is to feel eternity pressing gently against your skin. Yet to wake in the morning is to feel urgency, the reminder that what we do in one place ripples outward to others, that the fragile balance of life within deserts depends increasingly on the balance of life beyond them. So let this part of our journey linger in your mind as you rest tonight. The image of a cactus flowering at dawn, a fox leaving tracks on soft sand, a star overhead mirrored in the glow of a beetle's eyes. Let these small wonders remind you that deserts are not empty at all but filled with lessons of patience, resilience, and interconnectedness. Lessons we too must carry as we face the challenges of our own shifting world. Close your eyes now and feel the desert's warmth settle into you, not as harshness but as comfort. A steady reminder that even in scarcity there can be abundance, even in silence there can be wisdom, even in vastness there can be belonging. As we wander deeper into the story of deserts, it becomes clear that they are not only shaped by natural forces and sustained by resilient life, but also woven into the very fabric of human imagination. For across time, people have looked to these vast expanses not only with fear but with reverence, crafting myths that explain their existence and tales that interpret their silence. In the Middle East, ancient travelers told stories of jinn who roamed the dunes, spirits born of smokeless fire, capable of both guidance and mischief, their forms hidden in dust storms and their voices echoing in the lonely wind. In Egypt, the desert was seen as a boundary between the ordered world of the Nile and the chaos of wilderness, a realm where gods tested mortals and where the sun god Ra battled serpents in the dark hours before dawn. Among native peoples of the American Southwest, the desert was a place of sacred emergence, the setting for creation stories in which humanity stepped into the light from beneath the earth, learning to walk and live among the mesas and arroyos. These myths were not fanciful distractions, but living maps, guiding communities through the hardships of survival, giving meaning to harsh conditions, and reminding each generation that deserts were not empty wastelands but realms infused with mystery and purpose. The harshness itself became a teacher, a crucible where strength and humility were forged. For nomadic tribes, every dune was familiar, every wadi named, every star a companion in navigation. And to outsiders, their knowledge appeared almost mystical, though it was rooted in generations of intimate observation. Yet perhaps the deeper magic lies not in spirits or gods, but in the way deserts seem to draw the mind inward, stripping away excess until what remains is essence. Spiritual seekers across cultures recognize this truth. Christian hermits retreated into the deserts of Egypt and Syria to seek solitude with God. Sufi poets like Rumi used the metaphor of the desert as the space of longing and divine love. And Buddhist travelers in Central Asia crossed the Gobi in search of monasteries where silence deepened practice. Even today, modern pilgrims travel into deserts not merely to sightsee but to feel that hush, to confront themselves in an environment that refuses distraction. When you stand in a desert, you are confronted by vastness, by an immensity that makes your personal struggles seem at once insignificant and strangely meaningful. For the desert does not judge but simply holds, and in that holding one can find perspective. There is a reason why the desert is often described as eternal, for its horizons stretch without obvious end, and its silence carries the weight of centuries. Yet beneath that timelessness lies change, always slow, sometimes imperceptible but real. A dune shifts slightly each day. A dry riverbed floods once a decade. A seed waits perhaps 20 years before germinating after a rare rain. To humans accustomed to quick results, such patience seems extraordinary. Yet it is precisely this patience that deserts demand of us. teaching that endurance is not passive but active, that survival requires adaptation and humility rather than dominance. And so the myths and traditions that arose from deserts are also lessons in patience. Tales of heroes wandering, prophets fasting, seekers enduring trials before revelation. Each story echoes the environment itself, where one must walk long before reaching water, must endure thirst before tasting sweetness, must wait through heat before night cools the skin. In this way, the desert becomes both stage and teacher, shaping the rhythm of story and the rhythm of life. Imagine now, lying beneath the desert sky at midnight, the stars so sharp they seem to pierce the heavens, the air cool against your cheek, the sand beneath you, holding the warmth of the day. In that stillness, myths no longer feel like relics of the past but like living companions, whispering truths that transcend cultures, that struggle can lead to clarity, that emptiness can reveal fullness, that silence can speak. And as you drift into rest, let these stories settle into you like sand settling after wind, each grain a reminder that deserts exist, not merely as landscapes, but as teachers of resilience, patience, and meaning, guiding humanity as surely as any river or mountain. To think of deserts only as physical places is to see only half of their truth, for deserts also occupy space within our collective imagination, shaping how we speak, how we dream, how we understand endurance and transformation. Across languages, the desert often appears as metaphor, invoked to describe loneliness, exile, hardship, but also purification, clarity, and rebirth. Poets describe love as a desert where thirst cannot be quenched, or grief as a dune that shifts endlessly beneath the feet, while mystics describe the soul's journey as a wandering across vast sandscapes stripped of comfort until only the essential remains. Even in modern literature and film, deserts are chosen again and again as settings for tales of trial and discovery, for something about their starkness resonates universally, offering both danger and promise. Yet behind the metaphor lies reality, and within that reality are countless human lives shaped daily by the desert's presence. Farmers on the margins of the Sahel watch the creeping sands approach their fields, their livelihoods shrinking as rainfall grows more unpredictable. Families in the Atacama adapt to one of the driest climates on Earth, collecting dew from nets that harvest the faintest moisture in the morning air. Bedouin herders adjust their seasonal migrations according to the rare greening after rains, their camels and goats following age-old paths. These stories are not metaphors but lived experience, each one a testament to resilience in the face of scarcity. And in each story, we hear the echo of a greater question. Will deserts keep growing? And if so, what will become of those who live at their edges? Scientists measure desert expansion with satellites, their data showing how areas once semi-arid slowly cross thresholds into true desert, how once reliable rains falter, how vegetation recedes. Yet they also document resilience, places where reforestation, careful land management, and water conservation have pushed the sands back, proving that human choices can alter the trajectory. In Niger, communities have worked together to restore soil fertility by protecting young trees that sprout naturally, creating shade and moisture that allow crops to grow again. In China's Inner Mongolia, barriers of straw have been laid across dunes, stabilizing them until grasses can take root, gradually halting the spread of shifting sands. These efforts are small compared to the vastness of deserts, yet they matter, reminding us that even in the face of immensity, human care and cooperation can shape outcomes. It is tempting to imagine deserts as invincible, their growth unstoppable, but history shows otherwise. Just as deserts can expand, so too can they retreat when balance is restored. What is required is patience, understanding, and humility, virtues deserts themselves have long taught. And perhaps this is why deserts continue to haunt our dreams. They show us both what is fragile and what is enduring, both the consequences of neglect and the possibility of renewal. As you close your eyes now and picture a desert stretching before you, imagine not only the endless sand, but also the hidden seeds lying dormant beneath, seeds waiting for rain that may come tomorrow or a decade hence. Imagine the cracked soil that can bloom in a single night with wildflowers after a storm, the seemingly lifeless plain that bursts with green when conditions allow. These images remind us that growth is always possible, even in the harshest environments, and that no place is beyond hope. The desert, then, is not only a warning of what may come if we are careless, but also a symbol of resilience, showing us that life persists, waiting patiently, ready to emerge when given the chance. And so, as you rest now, let this knowledge soothe you. The desert endures, but so does life, and within that balance lies both caution and comfort. When we look at deserts through the lens of ecology, we find that they are not isolated wastelands, but deeply interconnected systems, each one part of the larger planetary balance, influencing climate, shaping weather, and supporting migrations that stretch across continents. The Sahara, for instance, though dry and forbidding, plays a vital role in nourishing life thousands of kilometers away, for its winds lift dust rich in minerals and carry it across the Atlantic, where it falls as fertilizer upon the Amazon rainforest, linking two seemingly opposite ecosystems in a cycle of exchange. Without that desert dust, the rainforest soils would gradually be depleted, and so what appears barren is in truth a silent benefactor of one of the most biodiverse regions on Earth. Likewise, deserts reflect sunlight back into space, their pale surfaces cooling the atmosphere, a reminder that even their emptiness contributes to regulating Earth's climate. In the Namib Desert, coastal fog created by the meeting of cold ocean currents and warm land provides life-giving moisture to beetles that harvest dew on their backs, to lichen that clings to stones, to geckos that lick droplets from the air. These small cycles sustain a fragile but astonishing network, each creature and plant performing its role with precision. To remove one element, to disrupt one balance, would ripple outward. For even scarcity is structured, even silence is ordered, and humans, too, are part of this ecology. Pastoralists moving their herds according to ancient rhythms, farmers planting drought-resistant grains, communities digging wells at the margins of survival. Yet modern pressures, climate change, overgrazing, deforestation strain these balances, pushing ecosystems to their limits. Scientists warn that as deserts grow, biodiversity shrinks. Yet they also note that deserts hold unique adaptations worth protecting, genetic blueprints that may help humanity adapt to a warming world. In the hardy seeds that germinate only after rare storms, in the physiological strategies of animals that conserve water with such efficiency, lie clues for agriculture and medicine, models for resilience in uncertain times. To lose these species would be to lose teachers whose lessons we may need most in the years to come. And so deserts remind us that conservation is not only about protecting lush forests or coral reefs, but also about respecting the quieter realms where life whispers instead of shouts. Imagine the hush of a desert morning, the air cool, the horizon washed in pale gold, the faint tracks of a lizard etched into sand like writing on parchment. That track may vanish with the day's wind, but its meaning endures. That life leaves traces even where it seems invisible. That existence is recorded in delicate lines that require attentiveness to read. If you were to follow those tracks, perhaps you would find the small creature hiding in shade, waiting out the heat, embodying patience and wisdom in its very stillness. This is the essence of desert ecology, not abundance but precision, not excess but balance. Every element finely tuned to scarcity. And as you let these images settle within you tonight, consider that the desert's ecology is not so different from the ecology of our own lives, where balance matters more than abundance, where patience and restraint carry us further than haste. In this way, deserts are both environment and metaphor, guiding us toward ways of living gently in a fragile world. The more we linger with deserts, the more we begin to see that they are not simply geographical regions, but living archives, preserving within their sands and stones the memory of Earth's transformations, each grain a fragment of history carried by wind from one age to another. Fossils unearthed in once dry basins reveal that these landscapes were not always as we know them now, that seas once lapped where dunes now rise, that forests stretched where cracked salt flats now glisten. In the Sahara, ancient rock carvings depict hippos, crocodiles, and herds of cattle, images left behind when that vast desert was a grassland watered by seasonal rains. In the Atacama Desert of Chile, preserved in the extreme dryness, are the mummies of the Chinchorro people, older than Egypt's pharaohs, their remains testifying to a culture that thrived in what we now consider lifeless. These remnants remind us that deserts are not finalities but phases, shifting chapters in Earth's long story, and that what we see today is but a snapshot of a continuum that stretches millions of years. For geologists, deserts are open books, their strata exposing layers of climate change, tectonic movement, and erosion, each rock a page in a story written over eons. For archaeologists, they are time capsules, their dryness preserving artifacts that elsewhere would have long decayed textiles, tools, even footprints. In the white desert of Egypt, wind-carved limestone forms, like frozen waves, bear witness to countless centuries of abrasion, each curve a record of time's artistry. Such landscapes remind us that the desert is not static but sculpted endlessly, a canvas repainted each day by wind and sun. Yet there is also a human memory within deserts, for they hold stories of migration, trade, and encounter. The Silk Road wound across arid stretches of Central Asia, its caravans linking China to the Mediterranean, each oasis a spark of civilization where merchants exchanged not only goods but ideas, religions, and inventions. The desert in this sense is both barrier and bridge, testing endurance but also connecting worlds. Even today, echoes of those journeys remain in the ruins of caravanserais, in the worn stones of wells, in the songs and stories passed down by desert peoples. To walk through such places is to feel both the vastness of emptiness and the fullness of history layered upon it, to sense that the desert's silence is not void, but resonance. And as night falls upon these ancient sands, and the stars emerge once again to cast their timeless glow, you may find yourself listening for those echoes, imagining the voices of traders, herders, and pilgrims carried still by the wind. In that listening, you realize that the desert is not empty at all, but alive with memory. Each gust a whisper of the past, each dune a monument to time. So, let this thought cradle you tonight, that deserts, though stark, are storytellers, and in their silence lies a chorus of voices human, animal, geological, that remind us who we are and where we come from. As we step further into this unfolding journey, we begin to see deserts not only as landscapes of memory, but also as thresholds of imagination, places where the human spirit has been tested and inspired in equal measure, for across centuries poets, philosophers, and artists have turned to the desert when seeking to express both solitude and transcendence. The emptiness of these spaces is paradoxical, because while they strip the senses to their simplest inputs, they also expand the inner world, inviting thoughts to stretch across horizons just as endless as the dunes. The Persian poet Hafez spoke of deserts as symbols of longing, where the traveler wanders searching for the beloved, a metaphor both for earthly love and divine union. In Christian scripture, the desert becomes the place of testing, where prophets fast and confront both weakness and revelation, emerging purified by hardship. In indigenous traditions of the American Southwest, the desert is not merely a testing ground, but a living relative, a being with whom humans are in dialogue, where mesas and canyons hold voices of ancestors that echo in the wind. Artists, too, have drawn inspiration from deserts. Georgia O'Keeffe painted the vast New Mexican landscapes with their ochre cliffs and infinite skies, her canvases revealing both starkness and intimacy, while writers like Antoine de Saint-Exupéry transformed the desert into a stage for philosophical tales, his time as an aviator crossing the Sahara, giving birth to images that would inspire generations through the story of a little prince. Even filmmakers return again and again to deserts, using them as backdrops for journeys of survival, for confrontations with self and fate, because something about the spareness of these landscapes makes human emotions glow more brightly. And yet the desert is not only backdrop but participant, shaping characters, bending choices, becoming itself a character in the unfolding story. Perhaps this is why so many who spend time in deserts speak of them with reverence, not as passive scenery but as active presence, a companion at once demanding and generous. To walk there is to be stripped of distraction, to feel the mind clarify as the horizon stretches endlessly forward, to sense that silence is not absence but depth. Even modern travelers who venture into deserts for recreation or retreat often describe returning changed, carrying within themselves a new respect for patience, simplicity, and stillness. And if you were to close your eyes now and imagine yourself walking across such a landscape, perhaps you would feel the crunch of sand beneath your feet, the warmth of the sun across your shoulders, the cool breath of evening arriving as the sky melts into shades of violet and indigo. In that moment, as your steps slow and the silence deepens, you might discover that the desert is not only outside but within, a reminder that we too hold spaces of quiet, stretches of thought uncluttered by noise, horizons of imagination waiting to be crossed. To dwell there, even for a moment, is to find rest, to find peace, to find clarity, and it is this inner desert, as much as the outer one, that carries you gently towards sleep tonight. When we think of deserts as teachers, we begin to notice how their lessons extend beyond their borders, shaping not only the lives of those who dwell within them but also the wisdom of entire civilizations. For deserts have long been sources of guidance on how to live with humility, restraint, and reverence for what is scarce. Water, the most obvious necessity, becomes in the desert more than a resource. It is sacred, revered not only for its practical role but for its symbolic power, a reminder that every drop carries value. In cultures shaped by aridity, rituals often arose around water, prayers for rain, festivals marking the arrival of seasonal storms, stories warning against wastefulness. The Himba of Namibia adorn themselves with ochre and butterfat, preserving both their skin and their cultural identity in an environment where water cannot always be spared for bathing. In Morocco, wells and irrigation systems called kataras, painstakingly dug by hand for centuries, not only deliver life to villages but embody cooperation, for their maintenance depends on shared responsibility across generations. Even in ancient Mesopotamia, where the margins of desert met the fertile floodplains of the Tigris and Euphrates, myths of floods and droughts shaped religion and law, embedding an awareness that human survival rests always upon balance. And across the world in Australia, Aboriginal peoples shaped their journeys around waterholes marked in songlines, weaving memory and geography together, so that survival was never separated from story. These practices reveal a profound truth, that scarcity sharpens gratitude, that fragility nurtures respect, and that environments of apparent lack can produce some of the deepest cultural richness. Modern societies, accustomed to abundance, might look at deserts as places of deprivation, yet perhaps it is deserts that carry the wisdom most needed in our age of excess. The wisdom to see value in what is limited, to live in tune with cycles, to honor resources instead of consuming them without thought. As climate change intensifies and water becomes more contested around the world, the lessons deserts have been teaching quietly for millennia may prove essential to all of us. Imagine, for a moment, sitting with an elder of a desert community at twilight, the fire crackling softly, the air cooling after the day's heat. The elder speaks not of scarcity as hardship but as teacher, telling stories that trace the migration of ancestors from one oasis to another, explaining how stars were read not merely for direction but for timing, marking the seasons when journeys could begin. In that gentle telling, you feel the wisdom carried in desert traditions, a wisdom rooted not in conquering the land but in listening to it. And as you drift toward rest tonight, let that lesson sink into you like water into thirsty soil, that life is sustained not by abundance alone but by reverence, that survival requires not endless taking but careful tending, and that perhaps the desert, so often misunderstood as lifeless, holds within it some of the deepest truths about how to live with life itself. When we shift from the cultural wisdom of desert peoples to the ecological wisdom of the land itself, we begin to realize that deserts are not barren wastelands but finely tuned systems where every creature, every grain of sand, every gust of wind has its role to play. For nothing here is wasted, and everything is adapted to balance. Picture the creosote bush of the American Southwest, its resinous scent rising after a rare rainfall, a plant so resilient that some of its clonal colonies are believed to be nearly 12,000 years old, quietly anchoring soil, providing shelter for insects, and marking the endurance of life itself. Or imagine the fennec fox of the Sahara, with its oversized ears radiating heat, enabling survival where other mammals might perish, its delicate paw pads furred to walk across blistering sands. Deserts may appear empty at first glance, But linger, and you will see the dance of beetles gathering dew on their backs in the Namib, the quick dart of a kangaroo rat storing seeds in the Mojave, the silent wings of an owl passing over the dunes by moonlight. Each of these lives is small in scale yet profound in its role, for together they weave a network of interdependence where survival is not just about endurance but about cooperation with the rhythms of the environment. The desert itself participates in this balance through its geological processes. Winds sculpt dunes into vast migrating seas of sand. Flash floods carve arroyos and wadis that briefly flare with wildflowers, while salt flats shimmer like mirrors where water has evaporated, leaving behind reminders of transience. Scientists studying deserts often discover that these extreme environments act as testing grounds for resilience and innovation, inspiring not only ecological insights, but also technological ones, as biomimicry looks to desert plants and animals for strategies of conserving water, regulating temperature, and enduring stress. The grooves on a cactus rib, the reflective hairs on a desert beetle, the nocturnal habits of lizards and snakes, each detail becomes a blueprint for survival in an era where humanity increasingly faces challenges once thought limited to deserts alone. To close your eyes and imagine a desert at night is to feel the presence of this quiet resilience. The stars overhead blazing brighter than in most other places on Earth, the air cooling rapidly, the land settling into silence punctuated only by the faint rustle of life that has learned to hide from the sun. It is in such silence that one can sense the balance of an ecosystem operating with exquisite precision, a reminder that fragility and strength are not opposites, but partners. And as you breathe deeply now, letting your own body find its rhythm, perhaps you can imagine yourself as part of that network too, a living being adapting, adjusting, and learning from the desert's timeless lesson that survival does not require dominance but harmony, that endurance is not brute force, but quiet cooperation. From the perspective of the wider planet, deserts may at first seem like scars, places where nothing thrives. Yet, in truth, they function as vital regulators within Earth's ecological balance, shaping weather, circulating dust that nourishes distant ecosystems, and providing a counterpoint to the lushness of forests and wetlands. Take, for example, the Sahara, whose sands might appear sterile but whose fine mineral dust travels thousands of miles across the Atlantic each year, fertilizing the Amazon rainforest with phosphorus and other nutrients that sustain one of the most biodiverse regions on Earth. Without this desert gift, the Amazon might not thrive as it does, and so we begin to see that what is stripped away in one place becomes abundance in another. Similarly, deserts influence climate by reflecting sunlight, their pale surfaces bouncing energy back into space, helping regulate planetary temperature in ways that scientists are still unraveling. Some deserts, like the Gobi, act as massive natural laboratories for studying dust storms, wind circulation, and atmospheric chemistry, while others, like the Atacama in Chile, with its astonishing dryness, serve as analogs for Mars, guiding our search for life beyond Earth. Deserts also store geological records in their rocks and sediments, preserving clues about ancient climates, long-vanished seas, and the shifting of continents. In this way, they become planetary archives, holding knowledge written in minerals rather than ink. Even their extreme scarcity of water can teach us lessons in conservation that extend far beyond their borders. In places like Israel and Arizona, technologies such as drip irrigation and solar desalination have been inspired by the challenge of growing food in arid lands, and these innovations ripple outward, offering solutions for global food security in an era when water scarcity touches more and more lives. Thus, deserts serve as both cautionary tales and sources of resilience, warning us of the dangers of imbalance while demonstrating strategies of endurance. And as you reflect on this tonight, think of the quiet paradox deserts embody. They are landscapes of emptiness that give fullness to the planet, places of apparent silence that carry voices to faraway forests, and realms of heat and dryness that hold within them blueprints for sustaining life everywhere. Perhaps that is why so many who visit deserts speak of a strange clarity they feel while standing among dunes or on salt flats, a clarity that is not only spiritual but ecological, for the desert strips away distractions and reveals connections that are often hidden elsewhere. As you drift toward sleep, let your mind wander with the dust as it journeys on high winds across oceans, linking continents, nourishing unseen trees, and reminding us that even the harshest lands are part of a larger story of balance and giving. And now, as we arrive at the close of our long journey through deserts, let us pause and gather the threads we have traced. For we have walked across shifting dunes, sat beside oases, listened to myths whispered by ancestors, and studied the hidden processes of wind, stone, and sky, all to understand why deserts exist and whether they will keep growing. We have seen how global winds, mountain ranges, and ocean currents sculpt these vast drylands, how ancient civilizations adapted and flourished on their edges, how cultures drew wisdom and reverence from scarcity, and how modern science uncovers their quiet but profound roles in the wider life of our planet. We have understood that deserts are not empty voids but complex systems of balance, fragile yet enduring, their silence carrying lessons of patience and humility. And yes, they may expand as climates shift, as forests fall and soils erode, reminding us that their growth is not simply a matter of nature alone, but a reflection of human choices. Yet even in that reminder there is hope, for deserts teach us not only what can be lost, but how to endure, how to live in rhythm with what remains, how to listen to the earth itself. If you are listening now from a city lit with neon, or from a small town where stars still shine, if you are listening from a place far from sand yet close to rivers, mountains, or coasts, know that deserts are speaking to you too, asking you to slow down, to value what seems scarce, to live with gratitude. Sleepy Explainer thanks you for joining on this long voyage, for resting your mind on these words, for letting your imagination walk where your body may never tread. Thank you to all who support and subscribe, for you make these nightly journeys possible. And yet remember, you need not stay awake for every detail, for the purpose here is not to burden you with facts, but to ease you into dreams, where deserts may appear as golden seas beneath a sky of endless stars. So close your eyes now and picture that horizon, stretching wide and timeless, where wind sculpts ridges of sand that glow beneath the moon, where silence carries a wisdom older than any book, where you walk gently and unhurried, not to conquer, but to listen. Let the rhythm of the dunes carry you into sleep. Let the memory of water hidden beneath dry earth remind you that even in scarcity life endures, and let the thought of distant forests nourished by desert dust remind you that all places are connected, that the world is one living whole. Tonight, as you rest, may you find peace in knowing that deserts, though harsh, are also generous, and may their lessons of patience, resilience, and reverence stay with you, guiding not only your dreams but also the gentle choices of tomorrow. Good night, traveler, and may the desert winds carry you softly into sleep.